Open source learning. How do we open source everything we're doing and make it a model that other people can use? So that was our big concept. And so we ended up doing things like making the whole school, also doing things like making the whole school orient around one project at a time. So fully interdisciplinary. Every subject area would tie into whatever that one project was at the school. And we went fully competency-based learning. We sort of like questioned the grading system, and we're like, oh, how could every competency, every standard we're supposed to teach always be in play, and students can always be working towards mastery of that standard? What would a classroom look like with a big project going on that's tied in interdisciplinarily, and this assessment system and all kinds of other wacky, innovative things we were implementing? So we went ahead with that. We didn't win the grant, but we were just like, oh, we have this whole plan now, so we can do this in trailers. Let's do it.
So it gave you the bones, essentially.
It gave us the template for transforming a school, for shifting a school culture, for shifting a school methodology. Then we implemented that totally different model for a year, and I wrote a blog for Edutopia, and then someone, an editor for a publishing house, read my blog and asked me to write a book. So then I asked my co-founder to co-author it with me, and that book became the sort of playbook for open way learning. Laid out our whole theory of change, which is, so it emerged from a school process.
Now, if you want to plug the book real quick, so I know it's on Amazon. What is it? What's the title?
The book's called Open Up Education: How Open Way Learning Can Transform Schools.
Perfect. Buy it today.
Yeah, thanks.
I feel like you kind of answered this just with a lot of what you just said, specifically with your coworker falling through a hole in the trailer. But what were the early challenges of open way learning?
I would say getting yourself out there as an organization and having the level of credibility you need for people to hire you to do the work you want to do. Like just getting out there and being like, hey, we do this now. Do you believe we can do it with you and for you? And so there was a lot of skepticism early on, especially about like, well, you did it in that one school, but could you do it here? Really? You know, is that applicable to our context here in wherever we are, you know, wherever that new client was? And so I think building that credibility in the space was huge. And then just the sheer fact of schools and the districts that manage them, or the boards that manage them if they're a charter school or a private school, they are often not really excited about innovation. Like there might be one or two folks that really are within that larger milieu and hierarchy. So how you navigate all that politically to actually get sustained innovation to happen in a place is a perennial challenge to our work. So it's an early challenge, and it's a continual challenge. Like how do you get in and shift a school culture for the long term? I think that's one of the perennial challenges for sure.
Were there any points where you wanted to give up? And if not, what was the lowest point when you were first starting out?
Yes.
To everything?
I think there have been times when I've just felt really ineffective. You know, like I wasn't a good fit, or open way learning wasn't a good fit for a partner we were working with, right? And that just that's a tough feeling that can get into your psyche, and make you kind of wonder about whether you're meant to be doing this work, whether you're an imposter. You know, the imposter syndrome is so real, especially when you're being brought in as some sort of school transformation guru, you know, and people are counting on you to come in and solve that intractable problem that's been around for 130 years, but maybe you can crack the nut as to what is going on in that place. And sometimes, despite our best efforts, we didn't have the right combination, the right ingredients to do that at times, and that feels bad. I mean, it's hard, and so yeah, those situations at times have made me want to give up. And then there's just the stress of it all, right? Of being a nonprofit that's totally bootstrapped. We don't have some angel funder that's like, here, have $5 million to go forth and change the face of education. We never had that. Every nonprofit, every business dreams of those people, right? That are just like, we believe in you. Your idea has merit. Go do it. And we won't even really check up on it. Like, just, we trust you. That just isn't the reality of this world. And so it's a constant proving ground that you are in when you are doing this work, where you have to prove to people that you're someone they could bring in, that could provide value for them, first of all, to even get in the door. And then once you're in the door, you have to hit the ground running and have an impact quickly. Otherwise, it's like, well, next year we won't, or next month we're not going to be working with you, right? So there's this, on the one hand, I love that pressure because it pushes me to be my best. And on the other hand, it can be exhausting at times and make you sort of bring you to your knees if you're not practicing a lot of really good self-care and not surrounding yourself with people that care for you and all that. So yeah.
And then how would you like summarize what OWL Open Way Learning does in like a sentence or two? Again, sort of the elevator pitch style, especially for people listening or watching who still don't know what sort of project-based learning is.
Yeah, so Open Way Learning goes into schools. Our mission is to co-design innovative school cultures, and our vision is that every student should be able to go to an innovative schools, because that way they can change their own lives. I'm paraphrasing it. Let me try that again. Run it back. Yeah, so Open Way Learning, the idea is, our mission is to co-design innovative school cultures. And so you'll hear some keywords there. So one is innovative, because we believe that innovative schools are the ones where students become change makers. And so not only change makers for their own lives, potentially, but change makers in their communities. So those are the schools, those innovative schools are the ones that are allowing students those opportunities today. So our mission is to help create more of those. And so innovation is in the DNA of what we do, pushing outside. Whatever you've seen in the traditional school paradigm, we like to push outside of that to give students those authentic project-based opportunities. And then the other thing you'll hear in that mission is we co-design. So what that means is we're not designing a school model for you. We're not coming in and saying, oh, here's our school model, plopping it down in a place that it doesn't actually fit. Instead, we're co-designing with our partners, with districts and schools, to actually co-create whatever it is they're trying to push forward, whatever innovative sort of new school idea they're trying to push forward. We're there as equal partners with them, because they know the context. They know what has been tried and what hasn't been tried. They know who they need to talk to. They know who the influencers are in the community. And we try to leverage those local assets to create this sustained innovation over time. And the last thing I'll say about that mission statement that's really important is school culture. So oftentimes, organizations like ours, they go in and they plop on a strategy onto an already existing school, right? So for instance, they'll go in and try to teach project-based learning, which is a very alternative practice, in a school that's very traditional, doesn't like to take risks. And people maybe it's really focused on college prep. Maybe it's really focused on test scores. Maybe it's really focused on some other aspect of things that when you try to bring in this strategy, it won't find fertile ground, right? So we focus on the school culture, and our elements of school culture, as we call them, would be living mission and vision. So ensuring that school or district has a vision and mission that you can see manifested in the classrooms, that people are actually animated by it, that it's not just some dusty old thing that's sitting on the wall at the Board of Education in the boardroom. It's something that you see in the classrooms, in every classroom every day. That is hard to do. So living mission and vision, that's a cultural element that we talk about. Radical collaboration is the next one. So thinking about how do we create collaborative cultures where people are sharing with each other, where people are giving each other feedback, where people are co-teaching, working together to create the best things for students, and where students are collaborating with each other, as opposed to that sort of that paradigm of the single student sitting there and writing. That kind of idea of creating collaboration, and then distributed leadership is another element of our cultural strategy. So thinking about how do we, once we have that mission and vision articulated, how do we then ensure that it's being enacted at all levels of the organization, rather than just the formal leader being able to say, this is our mission statement, but actually everybody practicing that mission statement, knowing it, and then distributing leadership from those traditional hierarchical leaders, principals, superintendents, etc., down into the sort of teacher-powered school or student-driven, student-powered schools, right? So thinking about how do we get all those folks that are on the floor, as it were, to partake in the innovation that's going on. With those things in place, then we talk about open source sharing. So sharing widely what we're doing, having students share their work, having teachers share their work, schools sharing their school models with each other, always getting better, always borrowing from other ideas. So that open source sharing. We believe when those 4 elements are in place, living mission, radical collaboration, distributed leadership, and open source sharing, you can have true authentic innovation can be layered on top of that. That's when those strategies that align with all this work that we've been talking about can exist and can thrive, and are organically and spontaneously created by these elements that we like to focus on a lot with schools. So yes, we train people in project-based learning. We ensure that that project-based learning, or that whatever instructional strategy it is that we want to push forward, is aligned with all those cultural elements. Because if not, they're wasting their money and time.
For the layman or a person who's never even heard of the term project-based learning, similar to the last question, how do you summarize project-based learning in like a sentence or two?
Yeah, project-based learning is an instructional strategy where a project that is authentic and collaborative drives the learning. So it's the driver of the learning. It's not the end result. It's not the end. Oftentimes people teach all the stuff they need to teach, and they say, now let's do a project at the end. In project-based learning, the project drives the learning the entire way. And you create, and ideally you're co-creating a challenge or co-creating a project with students based on their interests that then is going to encourage them to learn the content and skills along the way that they need to achieve that compelling final product.
It reminds me a lot, almost like going on a road trip, where the point of the road trip isn't necessarily the destination, it's the journey there, and it kind of reminds me of that in a way.
Absolutely, it's a process.
I'm curious why your main clientele are based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then obviously you've done work in North Carolina, but I'm just curious why Albuquerque, why that's sort of been a hub for you guys.
Yeah, I would say the Albuquerque work has been a big focus over the last year and a half of our organization, and that was because we had in our network someone who knew of our work, who's been in the Albuquerque schools for decades, and knew the kind of work we were into, and they wanted to design a summer program that sort of brought in a lot of the elements of things that are in our wheelhouse, like STEAM and outdoor education and project-based learning and design thinking and some of these things, right? So that project then turned from a summer program into working with a cohort of 90 teachers that were trying to push forward some of these things in their classroom, some of these elements that had been embodied somewhat in that summer program, bringing that into the actual school year.
It has been totally amazing, and I feel rejuvenated, and every morning I woke up and I was like, yay, I get to go to summer STEAM today.
So that's why the Albuquerque project was a big one, but it was one of probably 20 simultaneous projects. My work was primarily in Albuquerque because I moved out to the West Coast from our North Carolina hub where we started, where a lot of our projects still are in North Carolina. But this year it looks like my main work is going to be in North Carolina, actually in my hometown of Winston-Salem, which I'm really excited about. Yeah. 2 projects in my hometown, which is remarkable and exciting for me. And then potentially working here in Victoria and in Mercer Island, Washington, as well as Cedar Falls, Iowa, and Muskegon, Michigan. My main ones are going to be here locally in Washington, Iowa, and North Carolina.
Do you or one of your staff go out and you're there for a set amount of time working with the teachers and the students? And does it vary on time? And having 6 staff, like how do you kind of manage who goes where and for how long?
We typically, during COVID, everybody went virtual, and so there was a lot of these sort of Zoom professional development sessions, and there's a lot that was happening online at that time. And our understanding was for a lot of schools and teachers that they sort of burned out on that virtual element. So people have wanted us in person with their folks very frequently. That is our main model at this point. So yes, we fly out. One of our members of our sort of leadership team that's full-time is almost on every single outing. And then we have what we call our OWL fellows. And those are folks that are experts in education in their own fields. Some of them are like former superintendents or co-founders of schools or 20-year teachers or childhood education or young children education experts, for instance. Those folks are what we call OWL fellows. And depending on the geography of the project and on the expertise required, we will often bring a fellow with one of our internal team, full-time team. So that's how that usually works. And it depends on the project as to how long we're there. The North Carolina contracts, it's often a day or sometimes a 1.5 day. Whereas if we're flying out to Hawaii or Albuquerque or Iowa, it's going to be a multi-day. If we don't have a person who is in that geography, in that geographical area, those contracts will look somewhat different and tend to be more intensive and over multi-days.
How do you see, and this came up because I chatted to the gentleman yesterday when we were in the salad club together, and we were just talking about AI in general, and open way learning came up, and sort of your views on it came up because he talked to you about it the other day. So my question to you is, how do you see AI utilized in the classroom moving forward?
We're talking about this very regularly at our organization, and people are asking us to talk to them. They're asking us to do trainings on this and stuff. Disclaimer, open way learning is not AI. We're not oriented towards AI expertise. We're not trying to push forward AI in the classroom or keep it out of the classroom. So there's 2 camps on this issue. One would say, keep it out. Let's totally keep AI out of the classroom as much as possible because kids are going to use it to cheat, and they're going to use it to game all these systems. They're going to have it write essays for them. They're going to have it do their homework. They're going to have it the new versions of ChatGPT can actually do math with you and give you the feedback and do it and give you all the right answers really easily. You can take a picture of things and get math things answered now. So there's definitely this camp. And I would say, in my estimation, more educators are falling in this camp right now of damage control. How do we keep this out? It's the beginning of this new technology. No, it's not the beginning, but the beginning of the proliferation of it, I would say. And so they're like, let's keep it out. And then there's the side that's really optimistic. I tend to be on this, how can we use these tools to help students solve real problems in the world? Because all this reaction is based on staying in the status quo of what education looks like. This approach is very much oriented towards innovation and how do we let students use all the tools at their disposal to do real work in the world. So I think my optimistic vision is that people land in this camp. Inevitably, I think it's gonna. There's still. Tons of schools have no phone policies in them. My school had a no phone policy, despite all our innovation. Kids were using it to text and meet up in the bathroom to vape, right? So, put them in the little things when you walk in. You're not allowed to use your phones. Meanwhile, that's a huge tool to take away from kids. So it's a real issue to think about that. So I tend to be in the camp of my hope is that we figure out ways to leverage these tools to have students do more authentic. The other really cool possibilities are teachers can use these tools to design hyper-personalized, really creative projects and really creative learning experiences. You can be like, hey, give me 5 project ideas for how, little Timmy tells me he's into basketball. Give me 5 project ideas about how I can teach little Timmy this high-tech physics concept using basketball. And you can personalize learning through that in a split second, as opposed to in the past, it just relied upon the creativity of the teacher and student to be like, how does this connect to basketball? I don't know, moving on, you got to do it because it's on the test, you know, as opposed to here's how it connects, and why don't you go do this cool little project on that and learn more about it. So I hang it, and I've helped teachers sort of develop projects using AI. I'm like, oh, you can't think of an idea? Get on ChatGPT, ask for 30 project ideas or 30 final product ideas, and then elaborate on one or two of them and see which direction you want to go. My hope is that it goes that way. What I'm seeing in the education space is that a lot of people are in this camp of damage control at this point.
It's like you're having a dam that's about to break, and how you fix it is putting Scotch tape on the dam that's about to break. You're like, well, it's going to break no matter what.
Yeah.
And South Park actually did a great episode on AI. Of course they did. The students were using AI for all the papers. All the teachers were using AI to grade the papers, and it becomes this infinite sort of feedback loop. And I just thought that was very clever. Again, South Park kind of killing it.
Literally, a teacher we work with created a product that is a rubric that is automated. Plug the student's work into it. It gives them immediate feedback based on an AI tool. So yes, we know people that are in that space already from the teaching perspective. And of course, if you ask any student, hey, are you using ChatGPT for what? You know, like, well, it writes my essays for me. You know, like, and you can get through a lot of the AI. A lot of universities, especially, are implementing these sort of AI checkers, but it's easy to get. It can be pretty easy to get around them. So you submit your paper and it checks it for AI, but you can get around it. So there is the intellectual honesty piece of this, and I am really nervous about students' writing skills and research skills and ability to think really critically and synthesize, analyze information, because the tool does that so effectively in some ways, or it can at least fool you and hallucinate into you believing that. So like in some ways, I understand the hesitations that exist in this camp. I also acknowledge the inevitability of it becoming a really important tool for students to know, leaving school knowing how to engineer prompts and knowing how to use these tools and what they're really good for and what they're not good for is a pretty important skill entering into the job market.
What prompted your move from the USA to Canada?
My wife is from here and we'd always sort of had Victoria in our minds as a place we would hope to land. My wife grew up coming out here and being sort of charmed by the place, and it was one of the first places she took me when I first came and visited her in Canada. And so we always knew of Victoria specifically as a place that we both thought was very intriguing and wonderful. And then I would say a big motivation is partly her family being around and friends she grew up with, you know, being around, and so that community of family and friends, as well as the schools here. We were really excited to move to a place that, I don't know if you knew this about British Columbia's school system, but they committed themselves to inquiry and project-based learning in their curriculum provincially 10 years ago. And then competency-based learning, which is the removing grades from the equation and focusing more on learning, which is the stuff we were doing at the school and the stuff that Open Way Learning does, except provincially. I found that to be a really exciting prospect to have our children in an ecosystem that's been investing in this kind of way of teaching and thinking for a decade. That was really appealing, as well as the French immersion schools being a possibility, because my wife did French immersion kindergarten through 12. So she was interested in having that as an opportunity for our children as well.
Cool.
So I would say, yeah, and it's just an adventure. Like, my wife and I have been to all these countries together and led these trips together, and we just have adventurous spirits. And so it was just, hey, let's try a new adventure with our kids and see how it goes. And so that was one of the other motivations.
Yeah, actually, speaking to your kids, I want to talk about the sort of the monthly design jams that occur here. I want you to just sort of tell people kind of what they are, and I just wanted to add on that you bring your daughter to, you know, all the sessions or most of them. I've been lucky to been in lots of them as well, and they've been super fun. And the thing that I find interesting is having a child there just gives you a whole different perspective or different ideas that adults maybe wouldn't think of. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's really cool that you do that. And it's just fun having her there. I mean, that too. But yeah, just talk a bit about the monthly design jams, like what they are.
I was fortunate enough to meet Dan and Jamie. Dan first, when I first moved here, he was a UX designer and just a design thinking enthusiast. And as you heard in our mission statement for Open Way Learning, we co-design innovative school culture. So design is the process we use with those schools. And so I was really excited to see somebody was hosting something here at the dock around design when I came here last year. And so I just attended 3 or 4 of his 5 sessions and just loved them. And at the end of them, I go, Dan, what's happening after this? We done? He's like, yeah, I thought we were pretty much done. I was like, can we do this? Can we just keep going as a monthly thing? And he was like, I guess so, sure. And so that was the sort of genesis of it. Was Dan was running that, and I approached him about continuing it. And then after the first session that Dan and I did, he invited Jamie, who is a service designer for Button, into the group. They are just 2 of the most fun people to work with and brilliant designers. And so I just love working with them. And so we wanted to offer design networking events and design educational events so we could sort of create a community of designers and offer whatever expertise we had while learning from each other and learning from the community, all while just sort of having fun together. And so that's turned into the Victoria Impact Design Collective. And so now we've been helping, for instance, the Existence Project. It's a homelessness-oriented nonprofit here. We did a 3-series design jams on homelessness and humanizing homelessness in Victoria with them. And so we really want our design, we want to have some fun and do networking events while also having an impact on issues that are important to this community. So we did that 3 event series, and then we also collaborated with a local nonprofit to do a climate equity design jam this month as well. And that was really, really fun, really interesting. So just outside the box ways of getting people to think through seemingly intractable problems. Yeah, and I brought my daughter because she came to the first one and she just loved it and said, when's the next one? When's the next one? When's the next one? And now she's a tried and true member of the group. And loves coming to these. I think for me, it's important for her to see a process that can allow you to innovate and stay, have a bias towards action and stay lighthearted, stay sort of solution oriented, even in the face of these really difficult societal issues.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too, it's not design necessarily as in making a design of a dog. They're kind of conceptual ideas where you do these games together. For example, you guys have used like Lego before and like arts and crafts material. So I was wondering if you just give kind of one example of something you've done in the past, like a group activity that was more tactile, where like you used stuff to make something or solve something.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the premises within design thinking, which is a strategy that's emerged, especially from 2 groups called the first IDEO. Was like the first design thinking people that sort of made this framework that we use, and then Stanford D School created their sort of 5-step process that Open Way Learning uses, and so the idea with if you're using design thinking, if you're using that framework, is one of the best practices is to bring whatever your idea, whatever your concept is, into reality. And so that requires this concept of prototyping and rapid prototyping and getting feedback and having failing prototypes that you improve. And so getting 3-dimensional and using whatever random arts and crafts materials, we've brought in recycling, and just like recycling from our recycling bins and tape, and have people sort of bring their visions into reality collaboratively in a 3-dimensional way. So for instance, one of our favorite games that we've done several times over in our design jams, and I do all the time with Open Way Learning, it's called Protobot, protobot.org.
Yeah.
You just click a button and it gives you a random design challenge. And you go over to the table and you just grab whatever. So it'll say like, design a toaster that gives you an adrenaline rush. And then you go and you grab stuff from the table and start taping stuff together, and then you pitch your crazy idea to the group. But it's a way that we experientially teach the design process, which is like empathy. How do you empathize with the user? How do you define the problems of the user? How do you ideate many solutions and then prototype, and then test those prototypes. So that's the process. And with Protobot, you can teach all that like in 10 minutes. You're like, hey, where'd you see empathy? Where'd you see ideation? Where'd you see et cetera, et cetera. So that's the spirit behind that, is to give them, and it's an icebreaker and gets people warmed up. And then when they're laughing and they're being creative and being silly with each other, they're feeling it creates an element of safety in the group. It creates an element of excitement and thinking outside the box, which then we take to these more serious issues, for instance, homelessness and climate equity and things of that nature, where we bring that spirit of solution-oriented creativity into that space that's traditionally, a heavier topic, as it were.
Yeah, it was not something I thought about before until I started doing those classes, and it was super fun. What benefits can adults and companies gain from project-based learning who have maybe never done it before, or have done it but maybe not aware they're doing it, if that makes sense?
That's a great question. I mean, I've often thought that, man, if professional development for corporations and for government were project-based rather than what we like to call death by PowerPoint, which is the typical sort of, if you've got to do a professional development seminar, most people are going to picture sitting in rows, sitting and watching a PowerPoint for many hours, watching some speaker, falling asleep. Whereas we flip that. I mean, at any of you may not believe this because of my long answers, but like at any of our events, we won't talk for more than like 3 minutes at a time. And it's like, and that's only to provide instructions for the next activity. So we really believe in that learner-centered as opposed to teacher-centered. So, and that can happen in a lot of different spaces, right? So in companies, if you want someone to learn something really deeply, give them a project and provide them the resources along the way with checkpoints along the way and milestones that they're going to learn that material, right? Instead of read this textbook about how this process works, and then we're going to expect you and cross our fingers that you'll implement that with fidelity. Like, the best training happens on the job. The best training happens with action. So I think from a corporate training perspective, project-based learning would be the way to go. I mean, and so that means, what's your entry event? What's your driving question? So what's the event you do that hooks people into the experience? What's your driving question that sustains their inquiry over the arc of the project? What are your milestones along the way? Who are they collaborating with? How can we create teams that make sense? And then what's the final product that we're actually going to share publicly? If you use those just basic ingredients of project-based learning, you'll see that the learning becomes just this much more vibrant. The room will go abuzz. I mean, it will just shift the energy of the room immediately from the death by PowerPoint to the life by experiential education. I don't know. I haven't played with that phrase before, but there you go.
How I learn, like, if I don't do it with my hands or don't do it myself repeatedly, it just doesn't stick if I read in a textbook. And like you said, I'm falling asleep.
If I were like, hey, Matt, go read the instruction manual for this camera. You can't touch the camera or do anything interesting with it until you've read this whole manual and passed a test. How ridiculous is that, right? I
probably should have done, though, because you guys didn't see that Colin was in here helping me run the cameras.
But we both know that that's how learning happens. It's just in time. It's, I can't figure out this thing with this camera. Let me learn more now. As opposed to what we normally do in school and sometimes with death by PowerPoint trainings, we try to teach it all up front and then expect people to implement. And that's just not how learning happens.
No.
So
I think, small number of people maybe, but I'd say 80% of people need to do it tactfully.
I like to say our first company, my wife and I's first company, Pioneer Project, was my experiential master's in business. Like, you want a master's in business? Go start a business.
Yeah.
See what happens. You'll have to learn a lot along the way, right? And I could study all the things about business and I could read a whole bunch of books without ever starting one. And I probably wouldn't apply a lot of what I was reading. But now I know, like, if I'm running the business, I'm reading about stuff that I need to know, and it's going to be immediately applicable. So if we can create learning environments for adults in companies and in services, whatever, that create that sort of environment where people have a project that they're trying to solve the problem and they're invested in and interested in, they're going to learn what they need to learn along the way. And maybe you can provide them some resources. Hey, here's the manual. You need to do white balance? Here it is. It's on page 87. Cool. You aren't going to read page 87 and remember it when it's time to do white balance, right? So if we just honor what the natural organic learning process is, and we design learning experiences around those assumptions, as opposed to this weird factory model that has taken over our society for the last couple hundred years, it's learning will happen more effectively.
And then finally, my last question. It's a bit of a lie. It's kind of 2 in 1. But what's your vision for OWL moving forward and in the future? And do you have any final thoughts or words you'd want to share with viewers?
My vision for OWL moving forward is that we don't necessarily need to grow our footprint. We don't necessarily need to grow into this organization that's working with 5,000 schools at once. We need to deepen our relationships with those schools and really be able to have really powerful impacts over time. And we need to see longer, I mean, we're 5 years old at this point, so we need those deep relationships where we can see those impacts over time and measure them. So I think we're coming into an era in the organization where we've done a lot of work. We've worked with hundreds of schools affecting over tens of thousands of students at this point. And we're starting to look at how do we deeply research the work to learn from what works well and what doesn't. So I think we're gonna be doing a lot of research that way, partnering with higher education institutes. And I think we're going to continue to provide the level of hyper customized professional development that our districts and schools need, that listening to them, deeply listening to our partners, co-designing with them, and bringing as much student voice into the conversation as we possibly can. I see that as a new, stronger priority at the organization. We're also getting a lot more questions and inquiries around big picture strategic planning for districts and schools. So like what are we trying to do as an overall organization? And then having that strategic plan at a bigger level that we're then operationalizing within the schools. I see us moving more into that space and potentially actually school design. We're doing some of that work in Iowa now and being asked in various other places to sort of start new schools or start new school models within existing schools. So I see that sort of ground floor approach happening, potentially with helping open magnet schools or opening new innovative school models around. I would say in the next 5 years, the US and Canada are going to be really big emphasis. So moving into Canada more and entering into this space. And then over the next 10 years, I imagine us being worldwide and being in more international spaces. That's kind of my off-the-cuff vision for the organization. To me, my hope is that my life is an illustration to others of what's possible if you just commit to your purpose and commit to your vision for what's possible. Speaking of vision for what might be possible for yourself and for the world. And if you're doing it in the service of others, I'm a huge believer, and I've seen it happen so many times, countless times, that the world will conspire on your behalf and doors will open where you never thought there was even a door. And so if you're doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, as my stepmom always says to me, resources come your way, helpers show up, emerge out of nowhere, out of the woodwork. My hope is that my life can be sort of an inspiration to people that way, that you can just do the thing that you think is right in the world, and people will be there for it, and you can actually make a career out of it. That's my deep belief.
Cool. I mean, I feel inspired after that.
Ah, well, good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You can, Matt.
Yes, I'm gonna make it.
You're freaking doing it.
Woo!
You're doing it, Matt.
Baby step at a time.
Well, no, this is like an actual project.